Hello everybody, this is Dee from Glasgow Loves EU on Monday the 16th of January 2023, and we're delighted to be joined by two really important people in the Carry On Touring, from the Carry On Touring organisation. Tim Brennan was the original founder of it. I'm going to ask them to talk about themselves rather than me talk about them too much, and Ian Smith, who's been in the music industry, both of them been in the music industry for many years, and Ian was trying to publicise the issues around the difficulties following Brexit, and they found each other, and so I think it's a pretty strong partnership they've got. So I'm going to hand it over to you two to say a little bit about what you do and what issues we need to discuss today.
Tim, do you want to go first?
Yeah, if you like. So I'm Tim Brennan. I'm basically a video engineer that works in concert touring, basically. So what I do is I generally look after all the video elements of a show that's for quite large artists. So I do arena tours and stuff like that. So people like Madonna and all sorts of that sort of size band. In generally, I do quite large stuff. I don't really do the smaller stuff, but I've come from the smaller stuff in my dim and distant past. So essentially, I kind of started the Carry On Touring campaign because I did a petition with government with regard to visas and work permits. And I could see just after the Brexit referendum, I could see there was going to be issues in carrying on with what we do and the ease of how we do it via freedom of movement. And so I wanted to create awareness of what the issues were going to be. And so by doing the petition, it got picked up and went bananally viral and got debated in Parliament. And that's when I kind of hooked up with Ian. Mm-hmm. We hooked up with a company called Devo Connect, who are a brilliant company that help us do all our lobbying and stuff, and lots of influence in Parliament and stuff. And so we've done a few big debates in Parliament and stuff, but I'll hand over to Ian and he can fill in.
There you go. Thanks, Tim. Well, as Tim said, what happened was the way we got together, as I explained to the guys before we came onto the stream, I'd started a free-to-use non-commercial website just to try and give lots of information post-Brexit, because I could see where this was going. I'm a musician, as you can see. You can't see the bagpipes underneath the desk, but I do play them, really.
Wow. Yeah. Like Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart.
Well, I've got very good mates at the National Piping Centre in Glasgow. Finland McDonald is a very close friend. But anyway, so I'd started this website because I was talking to lots of promoters and artists and filmmakers. I actually work in various ways, and nobody knew what the hell was going off and what would happen after Brexit. Will we still be able to travel? What are the deals around visas, immigration, coming into the UK and out of the UK? Because for years I've been a UK registered sponsor with UKVI, bringing people into the UK. But also, can we still take merchandise? Can we take equipment, etc., etc.? So started the website. Tim and I found each other, maybe on Twitter, I'm not sure. It was somewhere. And Tim reached out to me, and the YouTube channel I created alongside this went viral and wild. So a lot of the crew groups, and also across different groups of creative individuals, and this includes technicians as well. This includes the set designers. It includes, I mean, I like the word crew is fine, but in reality, we have to remember that these are highly skilled individuals.
Of course, yeah.
They are vital to the shows to which they are attached. And this goes all the way from stuff like Tim in the sort of stratospheric heights of Chemical Brothers and Madonna, etc., all the way down to the touring bands or theatre groups or whatever. So we've also been fighting a battle to make sure people understand it is then totally inclusive of all those people. And I was on today with one guy who called me up, and he said, it's so good that you're including everybody, because we tend to get lost in the conversation because the narrative in the press is all about musicians, or you know, your Elton Johns or whatever, but they keep going back to musicians. Now it is musicians, but it's dancers, it's actors, models, believe it or not, wrestlers come under Arts Council England as entertainers. True. Anyway, so the idea was to try and get this information out there, but the core of what Tim and I do together, my key role in what I do, and I still do it, totally non-funded, non-commercial, is to give information and to empower people to know what they can and cannot do and know the pitfalls. And Tim and I together campaign to try and get easier mobility across that international border, which at the moment is UK and EU. Mm-hmm. I mean, the main ask at the moment, and it's sort of developed, I think you can agree, Tim, is that we're trying to get rid of the 180-day rule.
Yeah.
Both directions, because for you guys and anyone listening out there, people still get confused about this. And I can mention this guy's name. I helped recently a guy called Steve Barney, who's the drummer with Anastasia. You may have seen him on the news, and Tim and I and he were talking, and I ended up on James O'Brien's show for about 15 seconds.
Pal James,
I got 15 seconds, but I was quite worried. But poor old Steve got stuck because even though, I'm just going to say this in context, DCMS keep telling us they have created a situation where we now have free touring here, there and everywhere. It's absolute BS. It's always been there for third country nationals. Mm-hmm. So you can spend 30 days in Poland, 90 days in Germany, 90 days in France, blah, 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 blah. Great. Okay. But they're all different. But the problem is, sitting on top of all of that is a cap. And the cap is 90 days in any 180 days. Mm-hmm. And the way Steve got caught was that he'd been working with an Italian band. And that's not just for work, guys. That's for any reason.
Holidays,
if you pop over for a day trip to France, anything. So the bottom line is he'd been working with an Italian band working around Europe. Then he got the Anastasia tour coming up. And because the EU always count back 180 days from the day you're going into Schengen, he ran out of time to be able to finish the tour. I think he was about 8 days short on the tour. This is going to happen more and more this year. Now that things open up. And the difference is the UK count it as a block of 180 and 360, but the EU always count it differently. It's actually slightly better EU if you want to be flexible. But the problem in all of this is that towards the end of this year, I'm not going to go into too much detail, otherwise I'll spend all evening taking this up. But there's a new system called ETIAS coming in, which everyone sees as it's like ESTA in the States. Now, everybody who's not an EU citizen will have to register just to enter for 3 years. It's dead cheap. It's about €10 or €15. But the problem is that will now be automated at the point of entry. So in the past, until now, border guards had to look at your passport and try and calculate if you'd overstayed. Guess
That's
what?
why Rishi Sunak wants everyone to study maths till they're 18.
Exactly. Well, guess what happens come ETIAS and they bring in facial recognition at the same time. As you walk towards the entry point,
they go, no.
With your little passport, computer says no.
Yeah.
So that's just what I want to put in context with what Tim and I do. And I don't want to take up all the conversation. That's not fair. So I'll wind back now. There you go.
I'll just lead on a little bit from that, how it affects different people, because obviously you've got artists and musicians and stuff. Now, if you're a band, say, I won't mention any names, but say a medium-sized arena style band, you may go into Europe on a tour. You may be there, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks, and then you might go off to another different part of the world, and then you may well finish your touring for that year. How it affects technicians is that we may join you for that 3 or 4 weeks into Europe. Mm-hmm. Then when that's finished, we're going to go and join the next band and go for another 3 or 4 weeks in Europe. And then when that's finished, another band. And so you can see how quickly we would burn through the 90 and 180 days. Yeah. Now, I've got friends and colleagues that are losing work left, right, and centre because they've reached that limit. And, there's some of them will take a risk and say, well, I've got 2 passports, I can try getting on one and this and that. But it's so bad. And so, if you get caught, the likelihood is that you could be kicked out at least, you could be banned for a number of years, but you could also have your passport marked as an overstayer. And if you get your passport marked as an overstayer, if you try and get an American visa or an Australian visa and they see that in your passport, they're going to turn you down. So it is imperative that it really stinks, this 90, 180 days, but it is imperative that we do stick to that rule. And I mean, we see people all the time, don't we? All the time.
Just to sit on top of that as well, guys, just imagine an ordinary non-stadium band of, say, 5 people and a sound engineer are always doing it together. But each of those 5 people, being individual, might have popped off, one of them on a day trip to France, another one for a week in Ibiza. You have to keep a spreadsheet of each person's entry. So imagine if you got a 10-piece on the road or whatever, the tour manager has to go back to each one of those people and say, how many days have you spent in Schengen?
Yeah.
And then if they've run out of time, this is what you're supposed to do. If you have run out of time and you want to work in a Schengen state, you're supposed to apply for a Schengen visa for each country you go into. So if you go for a tour for a week and you're in 3 countries, you're supposed to apply for 3 different visas.
And they all seem to have different rules, don't they? Because I had a look at that report, and different, even within the EU and within Schengen, some of the individual countries have different rulings, don't they?
Just to make that clear, I'm going to give a shameless plug for the UK, the information site. If you go to ukeartswork.info, one page says entry to the EU, and it gives each one of the countries and what the difference of work permit free travel is, and exactly what you're saying, because when you click through to the backlinks to the government sites, each one has a different system to how you apply. Generally speaking, it's always a Schengen visa, but it's madness.
And the other thing is that because things are being updated all the time, you're faced with, well, I did it 3 months ago, but it's all changed, so I have to redo it all and research, go through everything again, and it's madness.
I mean, the phrase that's going through my head is the bonfire of bureaucracy that they promised, and what seems to have happened is, particularly in this world, that we've just created an absolute, I don't know, a Krakatoa of red tape and bureaucracy, and for the bands especially. I mean, I'm always, the big bands. I contacted a couple of friends that I knew back in the day, and one of them's in probably one of the sort of bands that you might have videoed, Tim, in the past. He was in a little indie band when I knew, and he basically doesn't really feel any problem because everything is done for him, because he's just one of the talent that pops up and does his bit. But
the larger bands,
the other bands, it's much more difficult if they're more involved in actually setting up their own tours and stuff. They have to find all this stuff out themselves and do it all themselves, don't they?
I mean,
it's everyone but the top tier. Sorry.
Exactly. Bands that were big in their day, older bands that are now sort of going out doing their
revival tours,
as it were.
Shall we mention Roger Daltrey, Tim?
No, that's not. But no, it's where those guys are. Like Ian said, they're taking a small band and a small amount of crew. They organise their own buses, their own bit of kit, maybe on a bus trailer, and it's just not cost worth. It doesn't work out because it just costs too much money to take that amount of people overseas. And that's the big issue, is because for someone like me, where as I said, where we're going from one tour to the next tour to the next. A lot of the time we work for American production companies or American bands that come over to the UK or come over to the EU to do their European leg. A lot of them are now turning around to us and saying, well, we can't use you because you haven't got that EU passport. It's too much of a risk, too much of a nightmare. So,
well, to take that a step further, in terms of passports, we're also finding that ballet companies are not and classical orchestras in Europe who are taking lots of UK artists and talent. You don't got an EU passport, or an Irish passport. Forget it.
Too much hard work.
Well, you just can't do it because then they know that they're going to have to get a visa to work, unless if you're talking, say, ballet, prima ballerina, etc. No problem. It's the same thing in music. If you're talking Elton or even lower than that,
but it's the same with the operas.
And the BS Roger Daltrey came out with, and several others who will remain nameless. Bruce Dickinson. Oh, sorry. Were saying, oh, well, it was all right in our day. Yeah, they didn't have things called computers then. And yeah, really. I mean, not ones that were portable enough to make any difference. The difference now is that everything is logged. All the data is logged. So you cannot do this so easily. I'm getting over and over again people coming to me the last few months saying, oh, well, it's been reasonable this year. I'm sure it'll be all right. And no, this, because of COVID, and now going into the new systems with ETIAS and EEA, that's the facial recognition stuff, it's becoming more restrictive or more organized, more. It's just not going to work. But to put this all into context, and really important, anyone watching this now, it is still possible to tour. You can do it. It's a pain in the arse, the extra work. Please don't let it stop you touring. Fight it the best you can. I mean, for some things where economics are involved, and it's now, for example, taking merch, etc., which I won't get into, but I mean, it's on a whole different subject. But it means that people who used to take a little bit of merch over can't do it anymore because it's not cost effective. You have to pay import duty and import VAT, doing possibly full customs declarations. So it is still possible to do it. I mean, maybe if you can get it made in the EU or made in the UK, whatever, but don't let it put you off.
Okay.
Just inform yourselves.
I'm going to have to stop you for a second because we do have Jenny on social media and she's got a couple of questions that have come in. So I'm going to pass over to Jenny now.
Hi there. So we've got a question from Bill. He said, how much have you tried to gain support from the stratospheric names and how successful has that been?
Well, to be honest, we have tried, and it's very difficult, I find, to get through the noise. You know, if you try and reach these people, it is quite hard. Even people that I've toured with, you know, there are people out there that listen, and we have. If you look at our website, we've got an amazing amount of support from all sorts of well-known names and stuff, but it is difficult.
Steve Harley, etc.
You know, and but yeah, it is a difficult one. And if we could get the likes of Mr. Sheeran or one of those chaps, you know, to recognise that there is a big problem further down the chain, I think that. I mean,
to be honest, just to follow up what Tim's saying, the most vocal of all, independently of anything we've done, has been Elton John.
Yeah.
And Elton's done a great job as far as he can. Well, Elton gets pissed off, and no stopping him, is there really?
No,
Anybody who knows him, or has worked with him, or has seen him. So there is support there. I mean, there is sometimes a feeling we've had from people of not wanting to put their head above the parapet. Like they support it totally, but they don't necessarily want to do that. But we are working on it. So if your social media questioner knows anybody like that, put them in touch.
I mean,
but Elton's stopping touring, isn't he?
Well, yeah.
The one thing that I can guess why, like Ian says, you know, people are scared. They don't want to put their head above the parapet because, you know, it does seem like this is a political campaign. You know, all right, personally, I would have preferred that we didn't leave. And I'll freely admit that. But Brexit has happened. We've got to make the best of it until something else happens along the line. You know, so it's not about, oh, you're a leaver or you're a Remainer or anything like that. It's about making the best of a bad job, basically, and making it easy for us to get back out and get back out on the road and keep working. You know, so, you know, like if you look at our parliamentary support, we've got parliamentary support from across the house, you know, from Conservatives, like Ian said, Ian Jenkin from sorry, what was
not it? Ian Jenkins,
not Ian
Jenkins to do with me.
But no,
Bernard.
we've got Bernard Jenkins,
Jenkins.
that's it. And we've got support from all parties, basically. So, you know, it isn't about politics, it's about finding a solution. And that's where we, you know, if we can get the bigger names on board and shouting out for our cause, that's you know, That's what we need. Come on.
You said you had a couple of questions, Jenny. You got another one?
Yeah.
Oh, well, the other one was just about the sort of, is there signs that there's going to be any flexibility at all? Say, for example, someone in a group came down with COVID and plans had to change.
Well, that's a good point, actually.
There are none in legal terms. No, there
Mm.
can't be. There's just no chance. I mean, in terms of changing this dire situation, the opportunities will arise when there's a change in government, which is obvious, but also when the TCA, the trade agreement has a clause in it which allows it to be renegotiated. I think it's next year or the year after. So we all know that this is creating a situation not just for UK musicians and EU, not creatives, dancers, blah blah.
Creatives, it's a good word.
But it's also important to remember that this is affecting everyone economically, both in terms of GDP for the UK and to an extent other European states wanting to work into the UK because it's a springboard into America, which is true. So as I often quoted, the UK arts industry was making, according to DCMS, £30 million a day for the UK economy.
Yeah.
And it's not all music, of course, but putting a stranglehold on this industry, which creates so brilliantly in terms of soft power, and also brings a lot of finance into the UK, if that's where your head's at. I mean, most people in music and dance or film or whatever, but most of the people who are practitioners are not breadheads. They're there because they love doing what they do. And this is strangling them. I mean, there's something else to be said for mental health as well.
Yeah.
Because the people that are being pushed down by all this situation, also there are mental health issues. There are mental health issues related to loss of income, loss of status, loss of being able to do what makes you feel alive. So begin to look at the after effects of that on UK culture, economy, and the way we live together. Then there are other elements to all this as well, which is far too big a subject to go into now. But the point is, this situation cannot be allowed to remain unchanged. It's why Tim and I are not going to stop. No chance. So the more help we can get from people like you guys, like the people watching today, we're not going away. Carryontouring.uk website is where it's at for the campaign. I'm beginning to sound like a politician now. So.
Yeah. I mean, just as a side, on our website, you can see I basically keep up to date. And so what I try to do is put in there all the latest news of what we're doing. So if, for instance, over the Christmas period, we had Lord Clement Jones had written to the DCMS, and I had received a reply which he sent through to me, and then we had quite a long conversation about that, and we're now working on a response for him to go back to the DCMS on our behalf. So we're not just like freaking around the edges here. We are talking to the Lords every day. We talk to politicians all the time, and
that's true.
We are really trying our damnedest to get this.
We often get criticised, or not criticised, critiqued, to saying, well, that's one side of the argument, the UK side. What are you doing about the other side? Well, fortunately, because I'm dual based, I'm based in the UK and in Austria, and I've been doing that for a very long time. I know for a fact there are people in Europe who are working in the industry, not just music, but various industries associated with creative, nighttime industries, for example, where we Tim and I have links as well, that see the UK as a very, very important place to work. And also European companies have bases in the UK anyway, as do UK companies have festivals actually in Europe. They run and
they
operate.
own them, right? Okay.
Yeah, there's several in Croatia, for example.
Oh, right.
There's one in particular, I can't remember the name of it, I shouldn't say anyway, but it's totally owned and run by, get this, it is totally run by a UK company. They were using all of their own UK-based technicians and support crew to run the festival.
Right.
Now, of course, that can't happen anymore easily, so it's better for the Croatian economy and the Croatian technicians, etc. But that company is generating revenue which is coming back into the UK. So you can begin to see, and the Croatians don't want the festival to die, of course, because it generates more income for the local economies as well.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is that when we did the Lords, we were at the House of Lords together, Tim and I, and a whole group of people around about, well, I can't exactly remember, but it's just before Queenie popped off. Sorry, Mom. It was around that time. We were speaking then in the House of Lords to a group of Lords and other MPs, and we were also brought on board someone from Austria, from the Nighttime Economies, who came in as a guest.
Yep.
So what I'm trying to say is it's a dialogue. It's
Yeah.
not just us shouting into the void from our side. We have got people coming back to us and supporting what we're doing. It's really important, that point, and that's what we're trying to carry on as well.
Okay, right. I think Jenny has one more thing that she wants to.
I was just going to mention that Steve Barney, who you mentioned, has posted on Twitter, and he's posted his experiences as well on Twitter if people want to have a read of that. So.
Okay.
Steve's a great guy, and what he did, what he wrote was really important. The blog he did, and thanks to Steve.
He allowed us to read that out in Parliament, and you could see the reaction from the Lords and the members of Parliament that were present at the time. Were quite visibly shocked by just how much damage or carnage has been caused.
Yeah.
One brief other thing that we did there. One of our other guests, a guy called Chris, took along. He's a production manager, and he took along a carnet, which is a document to
I was going to ask you about them.
And he showed a carnet for a small bus tour, and it was that thick.
Oh my God!
This is what we have to contend with, and you could see the Lords going, "Wow, we didn't realise that."
Yeah.
So if you imagine,
most of it.
I think it's a bit of a strange one with carnets because everything's done by a computer these days, but carnets we still carry around a wad of stuff like
Can I just say something here, Tim? Just to anybody watching who doesn't know, a carnet is for the temporary export and re-importation of equipment, so musical instruments, amps, etc. It's not to sell things, it's the temporary export. It's basically show customs so they know you're not going to flog it when you go over the other side. Sorry, I thought I'd better say that. Just to follow on.
It is important to also say that, if you're just a violinist and you've got a gig in Spain, you don't need to take a carnet. If you can carry your personal own portable instrument, Ian, back me up on this. You do not need to take a carnet with you. It only accounts when you start looking at carrying equipment. And by equipment, I'm talking amplifiers, lighting, sound, etc. Ian, if you want to.
I want to say something very quickly because I'm working with the MU. I've talked to Dave from the MU last week. There is some movement.
Union. I'm going to do a Laura Koonsberg here. MU is the Musicians Union.
Sorry. It's not Masochists United, but maybe it should be. No, there is some movement on that about definitions because, as usual, you've got UK, HMRC, the people we love, and then you've got the other side, which have got lots of different HMRCs, and it's about the transportation of goods for sale, basically, and they want to control that. So there is some movement. We might have some good news on widening the definition of portables later. But the other thing to say, I think it segues nicely into this, is that often we were talking about merchandise earlier. The deal now, if you want to take merchandise over to sell in the EU, for example, you can just, if it's under €1,000, you can just go in and do a simple declaration. You pay VAT, pay import duty, and all good. However, if you've got T-shirts, they've come under the rules of origin, which means that if they've been made outside the UK or the EU, you have to do a full customs declaration.
And that's not just printing, that's actual manufacture, isn't it?
Wow. It's manufactured. Say I'm wearing this T-shirt now, it's got a print on it. It's probably been made in somewhere like Turkey or Bangladesh or Malaysia or wherever. Because the origin of this, or say I've got a coffee mug or something, has been made outside the EU and the UK, it falls under rules of origin. So that means you must make a full customs declaration. Wow. So it means now that the only easy way of doing it is CDs are becoming less of a thing, of course, but vinyl. So people taking things like CDs and vinyl posters, etc., you're probably okay. But it means mostly if you want to get around it, you have to have your merch made in the EU, if you go in there, or the UK, if you go in there, then there's none of this. But it means you've got to outlay a lot of cash.
Yeah, because they'd be more expensive anyway, wouldn't they?
Yeah, potentially. But the other thing with Tim's saying, the carnet, we should all say, costs money.
Yeah.
You have to, and it doesn't just cost the cost of the carnet, just to let you know out there. You also have to put down something called a security deposit for 20% of the total value of the goods. So which you can get back later. But it means that if you've got 10 grand's worth of goods you're on your carnet going backwards and forwards, you have to leave £2,000 with your local Chamber of Commerce, which you only get back when you finally do the carnet at the end of the year or whenever. So if you've got 20 grand, you've got 4 grand to leave behind. That's, it's just, it's possible.
Yeah. Again, I think it's really important just to say, look, don't give up.
No,
I think, it is still doable. It is a royal pain in the backside, but
But like, back in the day, I mean, I was involved in music in the 90s, and I even did it myself a bit, jumped in the back of the transit and went on to, I was the merch woman. I was.
And you can remember the 90s.
Oh,
well
absolutely. Oh, yes, I was there.
You obviously lived a very clean lifestyle.
Well,
you see, there was
of course I did. But we just jumped in with the guitars and the T-shirts and the CDs.
Exactly.
And we went through different countries and then got the ferry home again. It was before the Eurotunnel. And it was so easy. But it makes me worry for bands, because the band I was with were quite a small band at the time. But for the bands that do want, because people always said that the bands would like hone their craft by going to, I mean, they did the toilet circuit in the UK, but then going to Europe was really good because you had to deal with all sorts of other things. So you kind of learned a lot of problem solving on the road, and you learned about trying to communicate with different audiences that perhaps didn't know much English, and you were singing in English or whatever. But it was a really important sort of rite of passage. And for bands at that stage, because there still are bands at that stage, it's going to be virtually impossible to do it unless they've got like stack loads of money behind them, or good agents that can negotiate stuff.
Well, there's another issue as well. It's about collaboration. So when you're trying to collaborate with a musician from France, Italy, Germany, Spain, whatever, Holland, in the UK and vice versa, it makes it more difficult, that process, in order to tour together and to be able to tour. So not only that, we lose massively culturally in every direction. So in terms of, I know there's a survey came out recently about the number of bands being booked at Spanish festivals, and it had gone down, I think, 35 or 40% or more, because the Spanish festivals were finding it more difficult to book them. They didn't know what they was doing. And I mean, it's like Spain came out and actually relaxed some of the conditions for musicians, and they brought them in line with the film industry in Spain. That was done by Live, and whatever DCMS say, I know it was Craig Stanley from and various others who were working on that. I don't know if guys, Craig Stanley's one of the top guys at LIVE, the UK Live Music Industry Forum for all the big guys. And that there's willingness on the other side to try and make this work. But we need to make it work better. In every way. And that's why, as if anybody, I often had lots of shall we say less than positive comments whenever I posted anything on the European forums, because we often people say, why should you have freedom of movement? Why should you be able to work? The deal is, what we do is for 1 or 2 days, you pop in, you pop out. We're not talking about going to live somewhere and work somewhere for extended periods of time. And it's an argument that often comes up. And it's like, why should you if I can't? The deal is, it's a totally different thing to being able to go and live and work somewhere for months at a time, to being able to just ply your trade and pop in and out.
Yeah, it's all well, I mean, it's a very depressing scene, but you two are not depressing at all. You're very positive.
We're not. I don't know. You're not seen as over a few pints, but
exactly. Don't forget, we are bumpy old men.
I've been reminded that we're getting towards the end of our time now. So, and I've not actually asked any of the questions I'd written down, but that's fine because we've talked about most of the stuff in a different way. So that's absolutely fine.
Right, check if there's anything we've not covered. Dee, anything?
Anything? I'm just going to give you a wee quote from because I did reach out to a couple of pals, and one of them is in a very established band who I met in the early 90s, still going strong. And he said, we did two festivals and a club show in Germany last summer and lost money as a result of the above, i.e. carnets, cabotage we haven't even mentioned, visas, additional bureaucracy, etc. We cut every corner we could to try and break even. And I know they lost money on it, but if this is his point, is what I was saying earlier, if this is what it's like for established bands, imagine how many bands starting out are coping, because it's just, I mean, they're the ones for me that I feel sorry for. But also I mustn't forget to mention, and you have mentioned several times, all the other creatives, all the because we've talked to an opera singer, we've talked to a horn player, classical musicians. I've got a friend who's working in musical theatre and sort of touring with that, and so all sorts of people are impacted this in all sorts of areas of the arts, and the arts should be
as well.
We've talked to a fashion designer in the past as well. Yes, and she wasn't anticipating any problems, but I think she might have come across one or two as we've gone through. But culture and it should be much more fluid, and music is an international language, and it should be able to move internationally, and for European musicians coming in, I mean, presumably they hit some obstacles when they come in.
Well, I'm a UKVI sponsor, so yes.
Not the least being, so the one thing that my other friend who's in the elevated position mentioned was the queues at the airports. So so obviously they, previously on an EU passport you could just float through the EU passport gate, but obviously you can't. I mean, I haven't even travelled into or out of Europe since then, so I don't even know, but presumably
slows you down a bit.
Presumably it does.
But one thing to say at the end of all this, I know we're getting close to the end, is that Tim and I know this for a fact, what I'm about to say, is that the UK government depended on the creative arts industries being creative and finding ways to get around it and not being pushed down and pushed around. They were totally right, but they didn't count on the fact that we're not going to stop until we get improvement.
Good.
And what it's done, this amazingly, it's brought together managers, artists, management, record companies, in terms of the music industry. People never really spoke to each other apart from shouting from the other corner about the deal. And it's brought them all as one to say, we ain't stopping until this gets sorted out.
Yeah, good.
And they it's bit of a, they shouldn't maybe have asked or what's the phrase, perhaps they shouldn't have wished for this, because it ain't stopping.
No, and we're determined to keep going, and if it means we're vocal and we're outrageously nasty to well, we're not really nasty to anyone, but if we find topics that we need to talk about, and for instance, why has this happened when the mobility was left out of the TCA? I mean, it's we are going to flag that up. We are going to sort of,
in Frost's words, we were a bit too purist. Yeah, right.
The purist.
We'll talk to you about that later, fella.
Right. I'm enjoying this conversation too much, and I think we better stop, because I don't know whether other people are. So I'm going to thank you very, very much. We will continue to sort of support what you're doing, and try and spread the word as much as we can. And we've got a lot of music lovers in our group. So
well, Tim and I are only in our 20s anyway, and look what it's done to us, but we're not stopping.
Like the rest of us,
yeah, exactly.
Okay, thanks very much, guys. Cheers.
Thanks.
Ciao, everyone.